So now it's time to hear from Chris Cordell. Chris is an integration engineer at Offchain Labs. As you know, Offchain Labs is the company that started Arbitrum, are the first builders of Arbitrum, and now they are a service provider to the Arbitrum Foundation, and they are still working to the Arbitrum ecosystem. And as well, Chris works on the Stylus SDK and helps teams to adopt the Arbitrum stack. And a fun fact about him is that he's an avid skier and loves to hike and enjoys Latin and country dancing. And I've been noticing that. So yeah, he's really good at that. So yeah, let's go, Chris. We are happy to have you here. Thank you. Woo!
Get set up. All right. Do I need to? Do I gotta allow this? Hang on.
Yeah, we have this slide.
Okay. Yeah. Will that work? Is this gonna work?
This one for next? Yeah.
If is this working? Can somebody help me out with this? Oh, okay. It's working now. Okay. Okay. All right. Let's go back. All right. Hi, folks. My name is Chris Cordell. I'm good to go. Okay. And I'm going to cover how to implement black shoals in Arbitrum Stylus. My name is Crisco. I go by Crisco, and if y'all need to contact me, those are my socials. But yeah, what we'll cover in this talk. Ooh, goodness, hang on. What? Let me just do this real quick. You switched. Oh, okay. Okay, cool. Okay, thank you. All right. So what we're going to cover in this talk is black shoals and the implementation of that. This is an equation, a famous equation that enabled the development and maturity of options markets and financial markets. We'll just kind of briefly cover sort of the history of this academic model, how it works briefly enough to like get you kind of familiar with it, but what we want to get to is how to implement this in Stylus in about 100 lines of Rust code, and demo that for you here to kind of show you one of the main benefits of Stylus is that it's really good for computationally heavy transactions. So black shoals is a great kind of DeFi type of equation you might want to implement in your own code. So this is a good example of like what Stylus's strengths are. So what are options? Options are financial instruments, give you the right, but not the obligation to buy or sell an asset at a given price. Call options are the right to buy an asset. Puts are the right to sell an asset at a given price. Main benefits of options are that it gives you access to leverage, enables you to manage your risk better. You can hedge your bets against how markets move. It's also useful for speculation. There are risks associated with options. You can lose whatever you pay for the option, which is the premium. They're very sensitive to price movements, and you have a limited time frame to exercise them. So if you might be correct about the movement of an asset, but if that asset doesn't move in the direction you intended it to until after its expiration date, then you're out of luck. So that's part of the risk. Options have been around for centuries. These are some of the historical examples of them. There was a earliest example known from history is like in ancient Greece, there was a philosopher named Stylus that he was securing. He used. He predicted the weather to kind of guess how good the olive harvest was going to be for a particular season, and he would secure contracts to secure the olive presses when he thought that the weather was going to be really good and the output was going to be really good. So he kind of like monopolized the olive press supply in good years, and he made tons of money from that. Champagne fairs in France were done in the 12th century. And then towards the 17th century, we started to see more formal options markets develop in London. I think, yeah, they called them refusals and privileges instead of options, and put options and call options. But yeah, and then towards the 19th century in New York, Chicago, London, it started to really mature. But options were always haunted by the fact that it was very difficult to price them correctly. It was largely a guessing game to say which contract was fairly valued or not. So they were always kind of limited really until the 20th century. Yeah, it was mostly just based on intuition, gut feel, you know. So the markets were always limited as a result. So some parallel developments kind of led to the formalization of options markets. Some of those are from just physics, and some of them are from just financial theory as well. So in the year 1900, Louis Bachelier wrote The Theory of Speculation, where he was modeling stock prices as a random walk algorithm, and that's what what you see on the right there is sort of a random walk of, actually that's basically pollen particles colliding with each other. And if you were to trace the movement of a single particle within that follows a random walk. And so this theory of stock prices also being chaotic but somewhat deterministic based on this random movement is it started to be modeled, what we call Brownian motion, in 1905. Einstein helped to create the model for that. And then a couple decades later, towards the 60s, we started to have developments around efficient market hypothesis. The hypothesis is that any arbitrage that exists in markets is arbitraged quickly. So anytime there's alpha or whatever in the market, it usually gets eliminated quite quickly. So that's a theoretical idea. It's not always true in reality, but I think over the long haul, this is the way that prices tend to work in practice. And then in 1973, Black and Scholes published, they had developed a formal way to price options, and they called their paper Pricing of Options and Corporate Liabilities. There was a parallel research from a researcher named Merton. His name is not always included, but he's considered as big of a part of this as Black and Scholes are. And if we go on, okay, so after that, in 1973, the Chicago Board of Options was established, and we started to get more mainstream options available in the financial marketplace. By the third year of CBOE being established, volume had increased to like 1.5 million contracts, and today nearly 1 billion contracts trade hands every month on the public financial markets, and that's over $40 trillion in monthly volume. So these markets are huge, and options and derivatives dwarf the main stock market by a couple of orders of magnitude. So again, key assumptions with Black-Scholes is the stock price will follow a geometric Brownian motion, random walk. That means it's just as likely to go up or down at any given time. Arbitrage is eliminated very quickly from the market. There's also the assumption that the Black-Scholes model makes the assumption that you can buy and sell any number of these options. Also, there's no transaction costs or taxes factored for in the equation, so that's something in practice that you have to sort of customize your equation for. And what companies do in practice today is they have customizations of this academic version of the equation, but for demonstration purposes, we're just going to go with the simple theoretical version. all securities are perfectly divisible. In reality, that's not necessarily true. You can't really buy a quarter of a stock or anything like that. But yeah, it still simplifies the equation quite a bit. Risk-free interest rate is constant and known. That's another assumption that the model makes, is that risk-free interest rate, when we talk about that, so it's like the price of government bonds or something that's basically like, you know, a government-based bond or treasury that's has a constant interest rate throughout the length of the contract. So you kind of have to average that out for this equation, and you know, whatever they're paying for T-bills or whatever is what you might plug in for that. Also, that there's no dividends during the life of the option. Dividends are not factored for. All right, couple of important definitions, kind of covered some of these. Call options are the right to buy an asset at a specified price. Put options are the right to sell an asset. The strike price is the price for the asset if the option is exercised. So if you're buying an option for 1 year from now, I'm buying the right to buy, you know, AMC stock at $10 a share. That's the strike price. Premium, that's the price that they paid for the option contract itself. So you might pay $1 for that contract, you might pay 50 cents for that contract in order to have the option to buy that. Whatever the premium is the price you paid for the option. Expiration is the date the option contract expires. For simplicity, we'll probably stick with 1 year for that. There are two primary types of options, so-called American options, which basically give you the option to exercise those options at any time before the expiration, whereas a European option can only be exercised on the date that it expires and not before. And the risk-free rate, again, which I mentioned earlier, usually the yield on government bonds or T-bills, and it's just a theoretical rate of return to kind of compare the risk in the model. So we'll get to that. So this is kind of the formula. This is, you know, I'll kind of briefly cover this, but I don't want to get too caught in the weeds on it because it takes some time to grok this, and if you've never seen it before, you'll probably not understand it on the first go around. But I'm going to cover the variables, and you know, like this is something that if you want to learn more about, I'd highly recommend researching later on. But yeah, essentially we're computing the call option contract. That's the left side of the equation. And then we're going to take the stock price, the S0, which is the current stock price. So what we're trying to do is come up with a fair price for an option contract. So we're going to take the current stock price, multiply that times the cumulative normal distribution of D1, which I'm going to present on the next slide. And from that, we're going to subtract the strike price, which is the price of the asset if it's exercised. So like the AMC example, if I'm buying AMC stock for $10, that would be the strike price. And then I'm using Euler's number raised to the inverse of the risk-free rate times the time to expiration. And then that's all multiplied times the cumulative normal of D2, which I'm going to cover over here. D1, so this, again, this is complex differential equation. It's probably something you're not going to get on first go, but just what I want to showcase is that you can take complex math like this and very easily port it over to Stylus Rust code in just like very few lines of code. And that can have a lot of powerful implications for DeFi and gaming, cryptography, and things like that. All right, so we're going to take on D1, we're getting the natural log times the stock price over the strike price, plus the risk-free rate, plus sigma, which is the volatility rate. So volatility rate in this case would be something like, when crypto, volatility rate is going to be very high. But in order to compute a volatility rate, you'd sort of look over the history of the asset and what the likelihood of it going up or down within a particular range might be over the course of that timed expiration. So, you know, with a crypto asset, the volatility rates should be very high. In some stocks and some things like S&P index or whatnot, this would be a lot lower volatility rate. But yeah, so we're just kind of multiplying. T minus T is the time to expiration. You see on the top and the bottom, we're just subtracting D2 is just D1 minus the volatility rate times the square root of the time to expiration. The simplified version of all that is at the bottom. Again, it's a lot to grok in a 25-minute presentation, so I'll just kind of show you that this is what we're implementing. And when I go over to the code, I'll kind of bounce back here for a minute and just kind of show you what I'm porting over. But, you know, this is just an academic equation that we're porting to Rust and making it simple to do in Stylus. So now I'm going to exit out. I can get the regular to show my screen. Okay, perfect. Okay, cool. Okay, so all right. So right down here, we've got the compute function that is the public function on this contract, and I'm hard coding a couple things in here. So currently, we're just going to go with the asset price as being $100, and that's the S part of the equation. Or S sub 0 in the equation. And then we're going with the strike price of 105. So this is just going to be an option to buy, a call option to buy this asset at $105 in 1 year's time. And the risk-free interest rate is 5%. We're just going with 5% for now. And we're going to say that the volatility rate for that asset is 20%. Okay, and one thing I want to point out that I'm using here is this Rust decimal library. This is a very helpful library if you need to do if you need to do financial equations. It's very handy. It's got a lot of built-in math functions for you. It's a fixed point math library. So when you're working with like in Stylus, we can't support floats. So when you're working with decimal points, using this Rust decimal library is like really good. It's really compact. It fits well on chain, and it works well for this environment. So it's a helpful library that I highly recommend. So when I'm calling this that's just like a decimal macro for that comes with Rust decimal there. And the risk-free rate is 5%. The sigma is 20%. The time to expiration is 1 year. And then we're calling this compute all function. We're passing in those values, and let's just jump into that function. All right, so it's got the discount rate, which is the inverse of the risk-free rate times the maturity raised to e to the x. E to this is the x. For e to the x. And so that's from that formula. If I go down here, this part of the formula right here where it's e to the negative r times t that's what this is. This is just e to the x. This is Euler's number, and then that's the x. So we're just porting that over directly. And so it's very simple to like port math over using this Rust library and using Stylus in general. So the square root of the maturity is also where we're taking the square root, I think, from here. Square root of t minus t is the square root of maturity. So that comes up in this equation right here, so we're just pre-computing that. We're taking the square root of the maturity times sigma, which is also exactly from there, sigma times the square root of the time to maturity. The k discount, which is the strike times the discount, that's the strike times S sub 0 times, where is it on the formula? I think it's over here, yeah. S sub 0 times the discount rate, which is up here, that's the sigma e to the, that's this part, this strike price right here. That's this portion of the equation there. And then as long as it's over 0, we're going to compute D1 and D2. Those are the D1 and D2 components of this formula here. And D1, we've got a custom function for computing that, where we're taking S over K times the discount, getting the natural log of that, dividing it by the square root of the maturity. It's square root of T minus T times the sigma plus 5% times the square root of T times sigma to compute the D1. And again, this is just porting this math formula over directly right into Rust. Then we've got D2 is just D1 minus this. We also compute the cumulative normal of D1 and the cumulative normal of D2. Then we get the stock times, this is just more of the formula. This is stock times CDF D1. So this is going back to the original equation. That's this stock price times the cumulative normal of D1 minus this part of it. So that's just minus K discount times the cumulative normal of D2. And all that comes out to this part of the equation. Once we've computed it all, we're going to get the price of the call option, and we're going to log that to the console just to show that. And we're getting it in two pieces on this particular example. We're going to get a mantissa and a scale. That's just the way it defaults, breaks up math in the Rust decimal library. We could combine the mantissa and scale into a single 256-bit value, but for now we're just like going to return two values here. So briefly, I'm going to run this code. So let's go ahead and zoom in, and I've already got a like a dev node running locally. So the contract has been deployed. I deployed it earlier. In fact, the contract was deployed at this address here. So we're just going to call that compute function. I mean, all the values are hard-coded here. You could obviously parameterize this if you wanted to, but for simplicity, we're just going to call the hard-coded values, but we're going to just use cast. Let me set contract to this, okay, and then cast send. Okay, I think that should work. And so this is yeah, so it should have worked, and then I think we go over here. Yeah, okay, the call price is $8.02. So that was for an asset which you have the stock price, the strike price at 100, and the strike price is 105, and the current asset price is 100. So the value of that call option, the price, the fair market price of that call option is $8.02. Okay, so this is just to give you an example of like the types of things you can easily do in Rust and Stylus that are basically impossible to do in Solidity. It's very difficult to do this without running into either, without roughly estimating it or anything like that, or running into stack 2D pairs, or, to do this kind of complex like square roots and Euler's numbers and all this. So, yep, that's kind of the demo, and if y'all have any questions, happy to answer them for you.
Hi. First, I want to start by apologizing for my lack of proficiency in English. And
No problem.
you mentioned that Stylus is suitable for DeFi.
Yes.
But could you provide any examples of DeFi project built with Stylus?
Oh, yeah.
Given that DeFi requires contracts to communicate with each other, I'm curious if there's any examples where Stylus has been utilized to that extent.
Oh yeah, maybe superpositions. They'll be here. They have a talk in like I think 1 hour or so. Superposition is one. They'll be talking on their project. So yeah, I highly recommend like sticking around for that. And what was the other part of your question? Is the
Could you provide any examples of DeFi projects built with Stylus?
Oh yeah, superposition is one of them for sure. But yes, there's and yeah, fair blocks here too. So yeah, so we got a couple speakers after me. So yeah, stick around and you'll learn more about those for sure. Yeah.
Awesome. Any other question? Okay, super. Thank you very much, Chris. That was awesome.
Thank you.
And